The Swiss Family Robinson, Chapter 17, The Pinnace. Finding next morning that the fowls and the monkey were as lively as ever, bread baking for ourselves commenced in earnest. The boys were so proud of their performances that each ate his own cakes for breakfast, and a large bowl of new milk added to our meal that made it a fit repast, luxurious enough for a king, whilst the poultry and the pigeons came in for the share of the fragments. During breakfast, I expressed my strong desire to pay another visit to the wreck with the three elder boys, that we might, if possible, obtain possession of the Pinnace, which had discovered on the previous day. For I was afraid the first change of wind might break up the wreck, and we would lose it all. My dear wife could not be convinced, at first, that there was any necessity for me to venture again on the treacherous sea, but she at length consented, on condition that I would on no account remain another night on the wreck. The boys were delighted to secure us against all ordinary risks. Each of us was provided with one of the cork jackets which we brought from the vessel on our previous voyage. Taking provisions for the day, we set sail with our tugboat, having the raft in tow, and in due time reached the ship. I directed the boys to load both the raft and the boat with the portable things that came first to hand, so that at least we might not return empty-handed, whilst I hastened to examine the Pinnace. I discovered to my great satisfaction that as each piece of the vessel was carefully laid in its proper place and numbered, it could be put together with ease and correctness. But so much difficulties presented themselves that had it not been for the strong desire I felt to have in my possession such a beautiful little vessel, it is more than probable I should not have attempted the undertaking. I was convinced that with patience and perseverance we should be able to reconstruct the boat, and I determined to try and put it together with the help of my boys, in the hope that some means for launching it would be suggested to me. The evening set in before we had half effected our purpose, and we reluctantly returned home with our load. On reaching Safety Bay, we were delighted to see Mother and little Frank on the shore waiting to receive us. "We have resolved to remain in Tent House," said my wife. "As long as you are visiting the wreck, it will be a shorter voyage for you, and we shall be constantly within sight of each other." I knew how little my brave wife liked residing in Tent House, and I failed not to thank her for her new token of her thoughtfulness. I was glad to be able to reward her self-denial by producing the things that we had brought with us: 2 casks of salt butter, 3 of flour, some bags of wheat, rice, and other grain, and a large number of useful household articles and culinary utensils. Next morning we returned to the ship, and an entire week was occupied with our voyages to the wreck. We started early every morning and returned home in the evening, heavily laden with such articles as seemed likely to be the slightest use to us. With incredible labor, the Pinnace was at last put together and ready to be set free from her prison. Her appearance was neat and elegant. She had a tiller in her and a prow, and a small quarter-deck on which to raise a mast and sail like a cutter, and being of a light build would not draw much water. We carefully caulked all the joint seams with pitch and tow, and on the quarter-deck we placed 2 small brass cannons, which we secured with chains in a usual manner on board ship. But now the greatest difficulty remained. There sat the beautiful thing immovable in its prison, and the thought that a storm might arise and destroy both it and the wreck led me to determine upon a most risky project, which I resolved to put into execution without saying a word to the boys. I filled the old iron mortar, such as it used to be pounding in by chemists, which we found in the steward's room, with gunpowder, and I covered it securely at the end of the stout plank, at which I cut a groove and laid a train of gunpowder. Then, having contrived a fuse, which I thought would burn for about an hour before reaching the powder, I closed every crevice with tar, and bound the whole together with chains and ropes to one of the largest bulkheads near the sea, on the side from which I calculated that the recoil of the explosion would set the Pinnace free, yet without injuring it. Ordering the boys on board the tugboat, I returned below deck, lighted the fuse, and hastily embarked steered away from the wreck with a beating heart. We reached the shore and were unloading the raft when a sudden and frightful noise on the sea, like thunder, made all stand aghast. My wife was the first to recover presence of mind. "The sound seemed to come from the wreck," she exclaimed. "And look at the smoke. I hope, my dear husband, that you have not let any fire near the powder." "There's nothing to fear," I said. "Boys, I must go back and see what has happened. Will you go with me?" Without a word, the three boys sprang into the boat, while I remained behind for a moment to whisper a word of explanation to my anxious wife and to assure her that there was no danger. We quickly rowed out of the bay, and I saw with satisfaction that the side of the vessel nearest us remained unchanged, which a light heart I steered on the other side, and was amazed at the destruction caused by the petard. The greater portion of the ship's side had been shattered, and the fragments were floating on the water, while through the aperture we could see the Pinnace fully exposed to the view and uninjured. "It is ours!" I cried with delight. "The beautiful Pinnace is ours!" We climbed through the opening and found to our great delight that with the aid of a pulley and lever we should push the Pinnace from the wreck, for I had taken the precaution to place rollers under the keel. Attaching the short cable to the head and removing the timbers we had placed to keep it in position, we threw our united strength into the performance and saw her glide slowly and majestically into the sea. We wished to surprise Mother and little Frank with her wonderful appearance, so leaving her safe on the side of the wreck farthest from the shore, we returned to Tent House for the night, and explained that the explosion of some gunpowder had injured the wreck, but that so many useful things were left uninjured among the stores as to require us revisiting it the next day. On returning in the morning, we found much to do. We got in the mast and spars, put up the rigging, and fully equipped our elegant little vessel. This occupied us 2 days. We loaded the craft with an ample cargo, including many articles too bulky for our boat, and when all was ready, we set sail. My boys obtained permission, as a reward for their industry, to salute their mamma as we entered the bay by firing our 2 guns. I acted as pilot. Fritz was appointed captain, and Ernest and Jack, at his command, put their matches to the guns and fired. My wife and little boy rushed out in an alarm, but our joyful shouts reassured them, and they were ready to welcome us with astonishment and delight. Mooring the vessel at the landing place at the mouth of the river, Fritz placed a plank from the Pinnace to the shore, and assisted his mother to come on board. They then fired a new salute, and christened the new vessel the Elizabeth, after their dear mother. Leaving our little fleet safely moored, we followed the river to the cascade, where we saw a neat garden laid out in beds and walks. We had not been idle. "This is my work and Frank's," explained my wife. "We found the earth soft enough for us to dig and prepare. Here," she continued, "I have planted potatoes. Yonder are fresh cassava roots. On this side I have sowed lettuce, cabbages, and other vegetables, and near them we have left a space for you to plant a border of maize and bamboo canes." Leading us further on and pointing to another division, she said, "This will do nicely for our fruit garden, if you will plant here the fruit trees you found on the wreck. And yonder I have sowed a quantity of each sort of grain which you brought from the vessel. Water," she added, "can be easily brought from the neighboring waterfall, and I have little doubt that the plants will grow and thrive and shall have a flourishing orchard." "You have performed wonders, dear wife," I exclaimed, after examining the fruitful spot. And then, as the sunset was approaching, we unloaded our vessels, secured our Pinnace to the shore by means of a rope from the bow, and loading the sledge with the things for our immediate wants, we took the road to Falcon's Nest.